Hello everybody, this is Drew here with my friend and brother Reverend Ron Pulley, who's a retired United Methodist pastor and a part of our congregation for 20 years.
Since 91.
Since 1991, quite a long time. We're here to talk with you today as we get ready for our series on worship that begins this coming Sunday, which would be November the 8th. We're going to talk with you a little bit about our altar furnishings here in the sanctuary. We've got a pulpit, a lectern, an altar table, and of course our font that many folks have been baptized from. And the neat thing is that Ron made all this stuff, and he's going to talk with us a little bit today about each piece, and we'll just kind of walk through it and learn as we go. Ron, tell us about this first. This is our font, and I'm going to get back behind the camera.
Okay.
And you just talk about the font.
Well, the first thing I think I need to say is Woody Mercer created this through his company, and that actually became the inspiration behind what actually ended up. I had heard that he would make a stone bowl for me, and so I went to pick up the bowl, and this is what I found, and it was far beyond what I had. And so then I had to redesign something that would tie in with this. And through the process of seeing something in an old church and all, I came up with a challenge for me, which is making something with 12 sides and divided into 3 sections for the Trinity. And then when I got to the bottom, I stayed with the 12 and the disciples. And it kind of, when you had the communion, the chalice, and the disciples going out, all of this tied together to me to speak about the symbolism of baptism, the symbolism of being a disciple, because in baptism we enter into discipleship. And so all of this kind of tied together, and then in the middle I put the seashell, which traditionally has been one of the symbols for baptism. So this one kind of came together, and each of the shields is a traditional shield that tells the story of each of the disciples. And the one kind of on the back side of Judas is the one that was the easiest to carve because it's a blank shield. And that's pretty much the traditional story. And so I think it's helpful sometimes that the sections of the church furnishings tell you a story more than just work as a function. I understand, I think it was Frank Lloyd Wright that said form should follow function. Well, in the church, I think not only form should be functional, but I think it should also share the gospel message in some way. And so that's a part of the intention behind this.
Ron, this is really great to hear. I knew about the 12 shields and the apostles, but I did not know about the representation of the Trinity in our font. I'm glad to hear that. That's new to me. That's the 3 sections that we see.
You've got the section that goes in and then straight, and then it flares out at the bottom. You've got 3 sections there.
Wow. Thank you, Ron. Okay, Ron, tell us about our altar table.
Well, this was the first thing I built for the church, and I was brought in here on a Sunday morning when this building was just a shell, and I was asked if I would be interested in making a communion table. And so I said, well, what do you have in mind? And Carlton said, something big. And so that was my description I started with. And as I got to thinking about communion, somehow I thought big legs. And I remember at the wedding where Jesus turned the water into wine, and that celebration. And then later when he spoke about the water, the wine being his blood for us. So I tried to tie the theme of a wedding and the jugs, and then the carvings of the grape, and somehow it seemed like the top needed to look massive, and so I made this. And So this came together. In fact, I even had kind of a vision that if out somewhere Jesus had to put together a communion table, he would get 4 water jugs and set him a big board on the top of it, and there's the table. So that's kind of image I started with, and it came out a little fancier than that when I got through. But it's basically simple, but at the same time it tells us biblical stories and about the life of Jesus. And that pretty much is what's involved with that.
Right. You just mentioned to me that the legs weigh about 50 pounds each, and you had to glue together 18 boards.
There's about 18 boards thick, and then on my turning lathe, I'd have to just barely turn it on and off until I got it balanced enough that I could actually turn them and because they're solid wood. And
then you hollowed out the inside to put 3-inch caster wheels.
The bottom has casters in it, so I had to hollow out and make a section for the casters in the bottom.
That's a really practical thing that I think a lot of times just we pastors and other folks who work around the church know that you have to be able to move this stuff around, and it's important that we can do that.
It was probably helpful that I was a pastor for a number of years and kind of know what's needful.
I think so. I think so. Okay, Ron, tell us about our pulpit.
Well, the pulpit, in a sense, the basic idea is this is where the Word is presented. And when we think of the Word now, we think of a Bible. But if we go back to Jesus' time, the book didn't exist. It was in the shape of a scroll. And in the temple, that's where we heard about the Word, and so I wanted something that would help us to be in the present, but at the same time be able to go back to the time of Christ. And so I tried to tie the two together and put a scroll look, which was interesting to try to make the wood do what I wanted it to there, and to somehow then give this appearance. But being a pastor, I also wanted it to be functional as a place where a minister could preach. And so what you don't see is what I considered what a minister needs if he's going to stay behind the pulpit, which we don't do that much anymore. But when we do, it works and holds what's needed. And the rest of the time for the congregation, we're reminded that our word is not a new word, it's an ancient word that is brought into our new world, and so this is a part of what hopefully helps us to do that.
It's great to see the scroll here, and every Sunday when I come up here, I'm reminded of our heritage and history of what the Word has been, the revelation of God to people, and how important it is for us to remember that on Sunday morning. And it is a well-designed pulpit. If we look back here, we've got a shelf that is just full of stuff. Here is Kimberly, our choir director's hymnal. She stashes it in here. Here is a lighter in case the acolyte's light goes out on the way to the front. Here are batteries for our microphones. And someone has left me a John Deere flashlight. I think it's so I can see my watch to know when to stop talking on Sunday morning. But even more than that is a footrest that Ron put in here that you only know that would be helpful if you are a pastor and have preached in a pulpit. It's great to have that, and it helps a lot. And this is also on casters and can be moved around as you see here. But it's a great gift to our church. And how long did it take you to make this, Ron, this piece right here?
I'm guessing about a month and a half.
Wow. Well, it's beautiful, and it serves us well, and it fits the space just perfectly, too. Okay, Ron, let's look at our lectern. This is probably, to me, one of the most interesting pieces that we have.
Well, this came after I designed the pulpit, and traditionally in the church, this is where the announcements are made and where the scriptures are the responsive readings and all come from this. And so I was led to, when Jesus, in informal ways on the side of the sea, would preach from the back of a boat. And so I thought that boat theme would fit with this, and so I kind of created what I thought would be a part of a changed version of the beam in a boat. And then some people see in the bottom down here the variations in the color. Some people see a storm going on down there. Some people have more imagination and vision, and maybe we see things that aren't there even, but it's there. So that became a part of it. Again, I like trinities, so we have the 3 sections there. So this is more of a boat theme, and then some of you may be mindful.
Now let's get him out.
That there is actually a boat inside of here, and from research I had discovered that at the bottom of C they had found this basic shape for a boat that would be at the time of Christ. And so I made a model of this, and even the sail is out of the Peruvian walnut. And some people see this in here, but this is just an added something to the whole nautical theme that you find here.
Ron, I've always been fascinated after I started studying the Sea of Galilee and the size of the boats that Jesus and his disciples would have been in. They weren't big, and to imagine Jesus and his disciples in a storm on the Sea of Galilee in something this small, we understand why they got so scared.
And there is an added feature. When I was designing this, we were meeting in the old sanctuary, and our choir director at that time, and still, was Kimberly. And Kimberly is not known for being a basketball star in her height. And so she used to have a little box that was behind the lectern that she would stand on to direct the choir. So I built into this a stand so that Kimberly, if she needed to, would be able to stand a little higher. Now, the way she does it now, this is not necessary, but I had Kimberly in mind. I have seen in one worship service about 8 or 9 year old child use this to help us lead in worship. So it is available and kind of is built in. That's again, form follows function. And
right.
So that fits in that way.
So it's a lectern designed for our wonderful short choir director.
That's right.
Or
Yeah.
8-year-olds.
Yeah, or
either.
a really short
Liturgist.
preacher or liturgist
Yeah.
or anybody.
Excellent. And all of this, Ron, is made from Peruvian
walnut, which is the same wood that's in the floor up here.
Okay. Where did you get that when you...
When the church bought this, they bought a lot of extra. And so it was rough wood. I planed it with my planer and then built from there. But I ended up, I don't know how many board feet of just rough Peruvian walnut. And so that it came from that. And so this was a part of the church's building.
Right. Well, Ron, this is great, and it's a gift to us to know the stories behind these very important pieces of furniture, furnishings that are here on our chancel every Sunday morning.
Well, I hope in some way it adds messages sometimes when we come into the church and we somehow have the faith around us just by looking.
We do. It's in this space, and it captures so much for us. And now I think as we gather for worship, we'll be even more mindful of the presence of God and our story of faith. Faith in Jesus in so many different ways throughout history. Thank you for sharing with us, Ron, and thank you especially for doing all of this.
You are welcome.